I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as the afternoon sun poured through the windshield. The city streets seemed unnervingly quiet, the usual hum of traffic reduced to distant murmurs. I adjusted the strap of my bag across my shoulder, feeling the soft silk of my blouse under my fingers, reminder that I had a life that looked perfectly put together, polished meetings, impeccable emails, the kind of life my parents would brag about if they knew. And yet, as my husband leaned forward from the passenger seat, his voice almost a whisper, my heart jumped. "Turn the car around. Now." Something in the way he said it, urgent, barely contained, made my pulse spike. My instinct screamed, and yet a tiny, stubborn part of me hesitated. I looked at him. His eyes weren't panicked, they were certain. That certainty, somehow, was more frightening than panic. I glanced in the rearview mirror. My daughter, 6 years old, hummed a tune obliviously in her booster seat. The late autumn light brushed her hair gold. My mind raced. Should I trust him? Could I trust my gut, the one that had carried me through every quiet, lonely battle before anyone believed I could succeed? Finally, I exhaled slowly. I eased the wheel into a U-turn, the tires crunching softly on the asphalt. And almost instantly, I knew I had made the right decision. My senses sharpened, and the world outside seemed to shift in a way I couldn't yet understand. Years earlier, I had been a younger version of myself, unsure, desperate for validation, and constantly proving my worth to people who didn't see it. My parents, traditional and proud, had always expected me to follow a carefully outlined path: college, a safe career, a respectable life that never rocked the boat. But something inside me craved independence, a life where my instincts, not their approval, could guide me. One evening, in a cramped apartment I had rented right after graduation, I argued with my mother over the phone. "Olivia, you can't just quit your job. You'll ruin everything," she had said, voice sharp with fear disguised as authority. I had sat on the cold kitchen floor, fists gripping my knees, my chest tight, tears threatening. My father's sigh echoed from the background, a sound of frustration I had come to recognize as silent judgment. "You're making a mistake, Liv," he said quietly, almost pleading. But then I remembered my grandmother's words, spoken years ago with gentle insistence. "Trust yourself, Olivia. The world is full of people telling you no, but your instincts will never lie." That night, with trembling hands, I packed a single suitcase, left a note on the kitchen counter, and stepped out into the night, determined to carve my own path. The fear was real, but so was the conviction. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay where my voice wasn't heard. Starting over wasn't glamorous. My tiny apartment smelled faintly of damp carpet, and the hum of the radiator was the closest thing to company I had at night. But every morning, as I brewed my coffee and watched sunlight spill through the blinds, I reminded myself, this is mine. Every choice, every step, it's mine. I found a mentor almost by accident. Mrs. Lillian Pierce, a seasoned editor at a publishing house, saw something in me, a stubborn spark, the kind that refused to be dismissed. She didn't coddle me. She didn't sugarcoat the challenges. "You'll make mistakes," she said one morning, handing me a stack of manuscripts to review. "But your intuition will guide you if you pay attention. Trust it." Long nights became routine. I learned to balance contracts, deadlines, and my own insecurities. Some nights, I doubted myself so thoroughly I considered quitting, imagining a life where I could just return to the path my parents had wanted for me. But then I would remember the cold kitchen floor, the suffocating judgment, the quiet whisper of my grandmother's advice echoing inside me. Small victories kept me going. The first manuscript I edited that received a glowing review. The first client who asked for me personally. The first time a check arrived that made me realize I am capable. I can stand on my own. And yet I kept it all hidden. My parents, my extended family, even old friends only saw carefully curated updates, photos of coffee cups, sunsets, or the occasional busy day at work post. They didn't know I had negotiated my first major publishing contract, bought my first condo, or learned to manage a small but thriving team. I didn't tell them because I didn't need validation anymore. My confidence was my own. There were moments of doubt, of course. Imposter syndrome whispered its lies late at night. They're going to find out you're not ready, it hissed. But I reminded myself of the whispers that mattered. My husband's trust in me, Mrs. Pierce's mentorship, and the intuition that had guided me this far. Each decision I made, each calculated risk I took, added to a quiet but unshakable power that I was only beginning to recognize. The hardest part, though, wasn't the work, it was staying unseen. I had learned how to be both present and invisible, achieving success while the world assumed I was struggling, as my parents had always predicted. That dual life sharpened me, made me hyper-aware, and forced me to trust my instincts above all else. By the time I bought my first luxury car outright, parked it in my quiet garage, and ran my fingers along the polished dashboard, I understood the lesson fully. Independence isn't just about money or titles. It's about listening to yourself, even when the world is shouting no. And so, when my husband whispered urgently in the car, something inside me clicked. I didn't just trust him. I trusted the instincts that had carried me from that cramped apartment to a life I had built with my own hands. That trust, cultivated over years of quiet battles, saved us in ways I couldn't yet fully see. The doorbell rang just as I was straightening a stack of manuscripts on my desk. I knew who it was before I even opened it, my parents, of course, and maybe a few family friends. Their visits were always a mix of surprise and judgment, the kind that made me feel like a teenager caught sneaking out. Only this time, I wasn't the scared, uncertain girl they expected. I opened the door with a calm smile, my posture relaxed, yet commanding. "Mom, Dad," I said warmly. "Come in." Their eyes immediately darted around the apartment, smaller than they remembered, yet brimming with an aura they hadn't anticipated. My artful minimalism wasn't just decoration. It was proof of careful planning, of a life carefully built without anyone noticing. Elegant framed prints, clean lines, the subtle scent of jasmine in the air. My condo wasn't extravagant in a brash way, but it radiated confidence, stability, and control. "Olivia," my father began, but his voice faltered. I gestured toward my desk, where a series of contracts and letters sat neatly stacked. "I know you expected to see someone struggling, unsure, still finding her way. But I thought it might be better if you saw the reality." My mother's eyes widened, darting between the apartment, the certificates on the wall, and the discreetly displayed awards on my shelves. You've done all of this?" she asked, voice tight, almost breathless. "Yes," I said simply, letting the weight of the words sink in. "All of it. On my own terms, trusting my own instincts, even when no one else did." My father's jaw tightened. "But we thought." "You thought I would fail," I finished for him, my voice steady, but not unkind. "And that's why I didn't tell you. I needed to learn to trust myself before I asked anyone else to." Then my husband spoke, quietly, from the corner where he had been watching silently. "Trusting her instincts today," he said, voice low but firm, "was the right move. We wouldn't be here if she hadn't listened." The room went silent for a moment, the tension thick, almost tangible. I could see the recognition flicker across their faces, the realization that the girl they had doubted had grown into someone who could not only succeed but survive, even when the stakes were life and death. I gestured toward the car keys on the counter. "That U-turn today?" I knew it was risky, but I also knew when to trust my gut. That's what brought us safely here. Their silence spoke louder than words. Shame, awe, and perhaps a touch of guilt settled into the air around them. My mother's hands trembled slightly, as if she wanted to reach out but didn't know how. My father looked at me, finally, not as a child he could lecture, but as an adult he could only respect. "You've grown into someone we didn't expect," my mother whispered, the first honest admission in years. "Yes," I said, letting the moment linger, letting them feel the truth, that my strength, my choices, my life were mine. I didn't need approval anymore, and yet I wasn't bitter. I was empowered, resolute, and aware of the power of intuition that had guided me from uncertainty to survival. For the first time, they understood. The girl they had dismissed had become the woman whose instincts, courage, and foresight had saved lives today. I motioned for them to sit, my voice calm, yet carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. Before we move forward, I said, there are a few things I need to make clear. Their faces shifted, curiosity, unease, and the faintest glimmer of respect all at once. I took a deep breath, letting each word land carefully. Trust isn't automatic. It's earned, and today showed me who deserves it. First, I addressed my parents. Mom, Dad, I need honesty. No more assuming what I can or cannot do. I need you to respect my instincts, my decisions, and the life I've built. If you can't, that distance remains. Their silence was palpable, but I continued, softer now, yet unwavering. I want to support you, but only if you're willing to support yourselves too. Change the habits that hurt you, pursue your dreams honestly, and stop projecting expectations onto me. Then I turned to my husband, my anchor in the storm. And you've always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. Today reinforced what I've always known. Partnerships aren't just about love, they're about mutual trust. We move forward together or not at all. I let my gaze sweep across the room, lingering on my daughter, who had been quietly observing. She watches everything, I said gently. The lessons we model now shape the person she will become. I will not let fear or outdated expectations define her or me. Finally, I paused, letting my grandmother's voice echo in my mind. Trust yourself. The world is full of people telling you no. That simple, timeless advice had guided me through years of struggle. It had brought me here, to the exact moment when life's stakes demanded clarity, courage, and decisiveness. I am willing to guide, support, and help, but on my terms, I concluded. And anyone who wants to be part of my life must meet those terms. Honesty, accountability, and respect for intuition. The shift in the room was subtle, but undeniable. My parents' rigid posture softened, their eyes no longer judging but reflecting tentative understanding. My husband reached out, holding my hand, a silent acknowledgement that he had always understood me, that together we had survived what could have been disaster. It was a power I had never sought to flaunt. It wasn't about wealth, status, or recognition. It was about boundaries, about teaching people the value of respect, of self-trust, and the quiet strength that comes from listening to yourself when no one else does. In that moment, I realized something fundamental. True authority doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to punish. It simply sets the conditions and the world adjusts. And for the first time, I felt the immense, liberating power of being both compassionate and unyielding, a combination my younger self could have only dreamed of mastering. Days passed after that tense, revealing afternoon, but the energy in the air had shifted. My parents began small changes, gestures of respect, listening without judgment, acknowledging my decisions without interference. It wasn't instant, but it was real, and that mattered more than I could have imagined. I watched my daughter, Lily, laughing in the backyard, her hair catching sunlight just like that afternoon in the car. I thought about the whisper that had changed everything, the urgent words that had forced me to trust not just my husband, but the instincts that had guided me my whole life. The symbolic necklace my grandmother had given me so long ago rested lightly against my collarbone. I had carried it through sleepless nights, first jobs, setbacks, and triumphs. Now, it reminded me that courage wasn't loud or brash. It was subtle, constant, a quiet faith in oneself that could move mountains when others hesitated. Sitting in the living room later that evening, I reflected on the journey. The fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of being unseen, all of it had led to this moment of clarity and empowerment. I had become the woman I was meant to be, decisive, confident, empathetic, and fiercely independent. I looked at my husband, his hand brushing mine, and silently thanked him for trusting me, for believing in the same instincts I had learned to trust over years of struggle. Together, we had turned the car around, quite literally, and in doing so, we had affirmed the choices, strength, and intuition that had shaped my life. And in the quiet of my own reflection, I knew this truth. Life rewards those who trust themselves, who act decisively when stakes are high, and who honor their own inner voice, even when everyone else doubts them. I whispered to myself, almost like a mantra, almost like a promise. I trust myself. I trust my instincts. I choose my path, and I will always steer it wisely. The wind rustled the trees outside, sunlight flickered across the floor, and I felt a profound sense of calm. I had survived, I had thrived, and I had saved not just myself, but the ones I loved, simply by listening to the quiet, powerful voice within. And that was the ultimate victory.